Let us get started. And um, if you would mind, Shella, to start us off with leading the Refuge and Bodhichitta prayers. And I guess it's best for if you lead it, it's best for us to mute it. It's sometimes a bit difficult over Zoom to time it together. So if you lead that, I'm going to mute myself and say the prayer here on my end, but muted.
Okay, thank you. For refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient.
Okay, so I thought we would start, as I usually would, with a short meditation, just to settle our minds and bodies, and also tap into a good motivation for joining this class today. Yeah, so first of all, just see if you can find comfortable position. And I will assume that everyone is sitting up, but in general, lying down is also a really good meditation posture, but we're all probably sitting up on cushions or chairs. So see if you can just find that position that really embodies wakefulness, but also ease and relaxation. So the chest is open and the breathing can flow freely. Shoulders drop down and hands rest where it feels comfortable. And then I would invite you to allow your attention to just drop down from the head. We usually keep it focused there with thinking and planning, fixing. So just like filling a glass of water, just allow your awareness, your attention to flow down into the body. And just become aware of this field of tactile sensations. And see if you can tune into your body without visualizing it or labeling it, just really becoming aware of the actual tactile sensations that are there. So the firmness and stability of the earth element, maybe feeling contact to the chair or the cushion supporting you, feeling movements, the air element, feeling heat, the fire element. And then maybe vibrations and other sensations associated with the water element in your body. So just tuning directly into the sensations that are there. And then specifically becoming aware of the sensations associated with your breath, with the breathing. See if you can follow the rhythm of the breath in the sensations throughout your entire body. So movements in this field of energy that is the body. And see if you can just pay attention to the raw energetic sensations without conceptualizing, without labeling. And this can also calm the conceptual mind. So when thoughts and memories, fantasies sneak in and try to pull your attention away, just merge your mind with the tactile sensations of the breath. Paying very, very close attention. And also as you breathe out, see if you can just emphasize releasing, letting go, relaxing. See if you can just connect with a deeper sense of ease. Like an almost existential kind of okayness. Just realizing that there's nothing that needs to be different in this moment. You can just rest your attention on the rhythm of the breathing. And then you can release your attention on the breath and the tactile sensations in the body and turn it towards your intention, your motivation for joining this class today. And we all have this deep longing for peace and happiness. So probably that is part of your motivation. Just finding ways to develop more clarity and ease, happiness in your own life. But also recognizing that we are completely interdependent on all other beings. So we cannot separate their happiness from our happiness. So then our intention for joining this class can also be to develop our minds and hearts so that we can be of greater benefit to others. And if we already have a Buddhist refuge, then our motivation can be Bodhichitta. This strong urge to wake up and to help all others to wake up as well. Okay, and with that, we can end this brief meditation and turn our attention to the class. Okay, so last time I started to talk a little bit about how our like the worldview we are that we grow up with in the West and the way we view the world, it's not really, in a sense, compatible with Buddhist refuge, and one of the most fundamental things there, one of the things that makes taking Buddhist refuge really about shifting the view or the way we view the world and view reality is how we view the mind. So from a Western perspective, obviously, scientists are very convinced that the consciousness that we experience arises from our brains, and that there is nothing more to consciousness really than the activities of our brains. And it's such an accepted worldview that people go around thinking that this is actually something that has been proven and that is some kind of scientific fact, but it is more of a metaphysical belief, because scientists don't even have the first idea about how a brain would generate consciousness, how the electrical and chemical impulses in this tofu-like substance in our heads would somehow give rise to conscious experience, like a magical genie just appearing out of a bottle or something. Yeah, it's just a belief. It has very, very little backing to it. So, and just from my own perspective, I definitely, when I was younger, I was a staunch materialist, and I firmly held the belief that, consciousness arises from the brain, and there is just this one life that we experience. But then today, I would say that, through study and reflection and just logical analysis, I certainly come to the conclusion that worldview makes very little sense. And for me, it's the important thing really is to start by, when you start meditating and you start just paying more attention to your conscious experience, you realize that it has no physical qualities. There's no physicality to consciousness. It doesn't have a location. It doesn't have a size or a color, or it's just not a physical thing. It's a conscious experience. It's a non-physical phenomena. And why would a non-physical phenomena arise from a physical phenomena like the brain? So I guess it all hinges on this, whether consciousness is fundamental or whether matter and physical stuff is fundamental. And of course, the whole idea in Buddhism is that conscious experience is not physical, and every conscious moment that we experience has as its fundamental cause a previous moment of consciousness. And actually, in a sense, what we experience as the physical world of stuff and tables and cups and so on, that's not something that we have direct access to. It's all conceptually designated upon what we experience in consciousness. And then, of course, once you start having that realization, then you can trace every moment of consciousness back and back and back, and then you come to the moment of conception. When you first became this little human being that you currently are, and then you ask yourself, where did that first moment of consciousness in this life come from? Did it come from the sperm and the egg? Does it, like, consciousness arise from a little piece of the father and a little piece of the mother, and then they come together, and as it becomes sufficiently complex, then boom, suddenly consciousness appear? Or does it in fact come from a moment of consciousness that is prior to conception in this life, prior to this human body forming in this life? And of course, that would then bring you back to the previous life, and the previous existence, and so on and so forth. And according to the Buddha, that's beginningless. So mind does not have a beginning. It didn't just start at some point. It has always existed, which is a really mind-boggling idea. But once you start to, like, tune into that kind of worldview, and when you meditate on it and you reflect on it, and you look deeply into your experience, and you see that this is something that's really resonates with you, and you start to realize that, potentially everything that I am in this life can be explained from prior causes and conditions in previous lives. So all the qualities I have, how much anger and jealousy and irritation and clinging do I experience right now? Well, that came from my previous actions. And how much compassion and generosity and tolerance and kindness is there in my mind? Well, that also came from previous lives. And the only thing that I will take with me when I continue this journey is the habits and the karma that I generate in this life. That's really the only thing that has any true importance, because everything else will just be transient in this life. Then I'm going to start to develop a very different way of viewing my life and what's meaningful than if I just have this materialistic view of there being one life and then it's over and done with. So that's interesting, because when the Buddha reached enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, then he gained complete access to the nature of reality, and he could just see the nature of mind, and he could he could see all his past lifetimes, and he could see the beginningless nature of consciousness. And he could see that all sentient beings are driven by karma, like the actions that we've amassed, and afflictions, the misunderstandings that we have about the nature of reality. And this is driving us round and round in a state of perpetual suffering, in a state of existence where we never find satisfaction. We have these temporary periods of pleasure and temporary things that are meaningful to us, and that bring, in a sense, temporary relief from at least the overt suffering and all of that. But none of it ever lasts. We never get to take any of it with us. We can have the most amazing vacation, say, and it's fantastic, and we're just enjoying it. But then we come home, and then it's just a memory. And then we get older, and the memories fade, and then suddenly it will be completely gone. And it really didn't contribute anything. It was like a dream that just happened, and then it was gone. The only thing that we do take with us are the ethical value of the actions we perform. That has lasting impact on our minds, and that's what we carry with us. So the Buddha, he saw the causes of our suffering, and then, of course, in his first sermon, or his first Dharma talk, then he presented what he saw as the Four Noble Truths. And so what is interesting with, if you have this materialistic view of the world where we live this one life and then it ends, we get what is the third noble truth, which is the truth of cessation, the truth that there can be an end to suffering. We kind of get that for free, because when we die, it's all over, and that would be the end of suffering. There would be no more suffering if consciousness just terminates when the brain terminates, and then we get the cessation of suffering completely for free. So in that sense, why would you even fear death? If you have that view of reality, then you should just live life as hedonistically as you can, and just enjoy it as much as you can, and go for all the thrills and all the amazing, wonderful experiences. And then you die, and that's it. You lived your best life, and then you die. So from that perspective, why would you need refuge? Why would you need really to develop your mind and your heart? Because you do your best, you live your life, you have your career, you have the best relationships you can find and figure out, and then when you're done, you're done. So from that perspective, there's really no Buddhist refuge. Doesn't make much sense. But of course, from what the Buddha presented, the other noble truths, besides the cessation or the end of suffering, he noted that in the first noble truth, that suffering is something that runs very, very, very deep. It's not just the overt and in your face suffering of being sick or losing people, or just like the suffering of overt pain. I mean, that kind of suffering is kind of obvious to everyone, but he also presented much more subtle levels of suffering, with the suffering of change, where even the things that we see as happiness has in its very nature this tendency to change, and as soon as it does, what was happiness turns into dissatisfaction and suffering and a lack of fulfillment, because we just end up running from one high to the next. And then this third level of the suffering that is inherent in just having a mind and body that are the results of karma and affliction. So there's this underlying existential sense of dissatisfaction that we can never rid ourselves of fully until we eliminate the causes of suffering, which of course then is the second noble truth, where the Buddha saw that all the suffering we experience comes from clinging attachment, and aversion and ignorance. So as long as we have the expectation on samsara really to satisfy us, as long as we believe that there's something to get, something to be extracted from the external world that will make us happy, as long as we have that idea, we will just perpetuate samsara, and we will keep on wandering in these different states of existence, and none of them will be satisfying, none of them will be fulfilling. And ultimately, everything we do within this materialistic confinement of viewing reality as, just we have this one life, then we die, consciousness terminates, we're done, then everything we'll do will be for within the confines of this one life. And of course, we can do many wonderful things. We can build bridges that people can use, and we can help the poor, and we can develop amazing technology that is super helpful, and we can have all these different experiences, but ultimately all of it in a sense is completely pointless, which is that's a tough pill to swallow. But ultimately everything we do that is just for this life is ultimately pointless, because we'll come to the end, we'll die, and unfortunately it will not stop there. We will be propelled by the karma we have accumulated into the next existence, and if we're lucky, then virtuous karma is going to ripen, and maybe we get another human rebirth. But from a Buddhist perspective, we might as well, if we have lived a very hedonistic life, and we've cared about the good food and the good sex and all of that, then that's what an animal does. So if that's what we've been all about, then why not animal karma ripen, and we get reborn as an animal, or worse, if we have been hurting others in our pursuits, in our hedonistic pursuits, then we may end up in much more unfortunate states of existence. So from that perspective, if we take on that worldview, and it's not it's up to everyone to form their own worldview and make their most informed decision about the nature of reality. That's an individual choice. It's no one's trying to convert anyone. But if we have analyzed it, if we listen to inspiring teachers, if we have faith in what the Buddha discovered, and of course this has a lot to do with the karma that is already there. If these things make sense to us, that's because we have the karma to even hear the Dharma in the first place, which is amazing. But if we come to the point where we start to realize that there is this continuity to mind, that we are, with everything we say and do and think, we're shaping our own minds. Like Lama Zopa always says, you can mold your mind, you can shape it into any form you want. So it's all up to you. And if we come to that conclusion, if we've taken aboard that way of viewing the world and viewing reality, then I guess we better start looking beyond just this one life and the pleasures that are to be had in this one life. And that's when we start to need refuge, and specifically here, a Buddhist refuge. Yeah, so let me just, I think I'll just pause there for a second and then just see if there are any questions or comments or anything that's come up from what I've just been talking about. Just tuning into where everyone is at the moment.
I have a question from last week, if that's okay.
Yeah.
You spoke of a word that I've never seen before. It was Eudaimonia.
Eudaimonia.
That's the one. How do you spell that? And what is it?
Okay, so it's I'll write it in the chat.
Thank you.
Greek.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say what it is, but
it's definitely Greek. And the other, so I mentioned two words. One was hedonia and one was eudaimonia. So these are, they're obviously not Buddhist words. They are Greek words, and they come, from the tradition of Plato and Socrates and all of that. But I find there are really good terms to use, especially when you talk to people in a that come from a more Western, like a more Western philosophical tradition than maybe an Eastern. I find these words to be super helpful, and they basically mean, hedonia means what we can get, the pleasure, the happiness we get from really sensual pleasures. So it's the stuff that we can consume, like we can have a wonderful meal, we can have all these different types of experiences, and I also last time I also talked about the holy trinity of wealth, prestige, and power. So those are hedonic ways of finding satisfaction and happiness. Whereas eudaimonia is the word for inner happiness, or the happiness that comes from cultivating inner qualities, such as obviously forgiveness or compassion or wisdom. So eudaimonia is more about what we give to the world, the happiness that comes from contributing, from service, from cultivating these wholesome inner qualities. And both, I mean, Eudaimonia is a more stable type of happiness. It's not contingent upon external conditions. If you have a deep sense of Eudaimonia, you can really be in any situation and feel content and joyful and happy. Potentially, you could even be, like in the worst. There's so many examples of Tibetan teachers that spend, lamas that spend decades in Chinese concentration camps where they were basically tortured daily, and there were starvation and just the most horrific conditions possible, and yet they seem to have just flowed through it with all that inner fortitude intact, and having compassion for their captors, and somehow remaining at ease and joyful through the worst possible conditions one can experience. So that would be true eudaimonia. But then, of course, hedonia is also valid. I mean, we have to take care of our bodies. We need to have a roof over our heads, and we need to have food on our tables. So hedonic happiness is important, but we can't put all our eggs in the hedonic basket, because that's going to lead to disaster. And that's the problem, is that our society only teaches us about hedonic happiness. So one of my teachers, Lama Alan Wallace, he was someone asked him a question, and this was in relation to what His Holiness the Dalai Lama talks about, secular ethics, and Lama Yeshe talked about universal education, and just ways of promoting Dharma in society without necessarily everyone having to be Buddhist, but like, what are the principles that can be extracted from Buddha Dharma, and then taught in schools and companies and whatever, just helping people to live more satisfied and meaningful life. And so anyway, so Alan Wallace was asked, what is the most important thing that we should teach? I think it might have been kids in school. You can teach mindfulness and meditation and secular ethics and so on, but what would be the most important thing to teach kids? And Alan said that, well, teaching them to distinguish between hedonia and eudaimonia would be the most important thing, to give people an understanding of the difference between hedonic happiness and eudaimonic happiness. And that's also why I find the terms helpful when you talk to people who are not Buddhist, because the very fact that they're not Buddhist terms, but they point to something that is completely central to Buddha Dharma, which is that it's the cultivation of the mind, it's the cultivation of wisdom and compassion and inner qualities. That is really the most important thing. So we should make our lives about eudaimonia and not hedonia. So long answer, but I hope does that make sense? Or yeah.
Completely. Thank you.
So yeah, we should. They're tricky words, but we should make them. We should make them part of like the public discourse, and teach them in schools, and fill those two words with meaning for people, so they we don't have to be Buddhist, but for, you know, if you're atheist or Christian or Muslim or whatever, it still makes sense to focus on eudaimonia and not run around and think that hedonia will satisfy you ultimately. Okay, so so how about this how about this the whole idea of the continuity of mind and consciousness being this non-physical phenomena that doesn't really arise from the brain, but that is something that came along from previous lives, and that will carry on beyond the point of death in this life. Is that I don't know where everyone is, but how does that is that a completely obvious idea to you, or does it make a little sense, or does it make no sense at all? Just, yeah, I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on that.
It makes sense to me. It makes sense to me in that at the very basic level, I can observe it in nature. I can see a tree have some sort of flower or fruit, and then that transforms into another piece of fruit, which becomes a tree, you know. Things that decompose and then give like life to something else. So I think like just being able to observe that process lays a foundation for me to understand that that this finitude that I see that I have is really not necessarily finitude. That something has to go on beyond me. So just at that kind of like intuitive level, I think that you know, it makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. That's I think that's a good it's a good way of viewing it. So we have, you know, everything else in nature is conserved, you know, like you said, the seed turning into the tree, turning into fruit, turning into seed, and so on. So nothing is ever lost. There's something never becomes nothing, and something also never arises from nothing. There's all these prior causes and conditions that just carry on this ongoing process that can have no beginning and will have no end. And obviously it makes sense that the same would be true for consciousness. A moment of consciousness cannot just arise out of nothing, and it will never turn into nothing. So then for the same reason, we have this continuity of consciousness, just like everything else in nature, in the natural world. But again, it all hinges on the realization that consciousness is a non-physical phenomena. And
I came across, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I came across, it was about a month or so ago, it was a little research article where these researchers did like a survey and said that about half the people worldwide believe that the mind is separate from the brain. And the way that it was presented was like, oh, can you believe these people? They think the mind is separate than the brain. And I just found that fascinating because how did we get the mind located in the brain in scientific thought? Because there may be correlations, like, if you have a thought and I do a brain scan, there may be some connection there, but we're not looking for, some traditions located in the heart. And, as we go along, we find, people call, they're now looking at the gut as being the little brain. So, where is it located? And there's all these medical traditions of, of the past that kind of located things, emotions and everything throughout the body, not just in the brain. So I find it fascinating that we've somehow latched onto this idea that the brain and the mind are the same.
Yeah. Yeah, to the extent where we no longer, if you read the press, they no longer talk about mind, they talk about brain. And the entire person is just completely identified with the brain. The brain is the person. And also, like you said, where any other idea is just viewed as complete nonsense and wacko, well, at the same time, they have no explanation whatsoever as to how consciousness could arise from the brain. Everyone just skips over that part and happily lives in this complete hallucination that it's all been explained. We know it's the brain. Let's carry on. So it's fascinating. But I actually, personally, I think that there will be a shift because if you look at, if one looks at developments in the field of quantum mechanics and modern physics, they are actually coming to a point where the only way of explaining what they're discovering is to bring in consciousness, to bring in a conscious observer into the equation. That's the only way of explaining what they're seeing. There maybe 5% of all physicists seems to start to open up to this, but I think there'll be a shift, and it will be a revolution on the scale of when Einstein discovered general relativity, or when quantum physics was discovered, and so on. So I think consciousness will take its place in just the view of the natural world, but it's not gonna, like all shifts of paradigm, it's gonna be probably pretty messy, but I think we'll get there eventually. And it's fascinating to see the convergence of Buddhist thought and philosophy, the teachings on emptiness and so on, in dialogue with quantum mechanics and modern physics and so on. But I guess the point is, like, how are we living our lives? Are we really, if we do, at least intellectually, buy into the idea that the death of this body will not be the end? All my tendencies, all my karma, all my afflictions, and all my virtues, they will carry on. That's what's going to carry on, and that's what's going to determine future states of existence. So the Tibetans has this saying, if you want to know your past, as in past lives, what you were up to, then look at your body. This body is the fruit of past karma and actually a lot of past virtue. We're in this amazing situation because of just an insane amount of past virtue that we've amassed. But then if you want to know your future, then you look at your mind. So what's going on in your mind? What are the seeds that you're sowing for the future? And And if we buy into this idea, are we really orienting our lives in that way? Are we practicing Dharma? Are we developing our positive inner qualities? Are we is that our main focus in life? Or are we spending our time engaged in things that are ultimately pretty meaningless? Like, what are we focusing on? Are we focusing on our career? Are we, bitching about politics? Are we upset about this and that? Or are we trying to just make more money, get in a better relationship, have more wonderful vacations, learn to cook more wonderful food? Is that what we're focusing on? And none of that is, it's good to enjoy, if we eat a wonderful meal, we should enjoy it to the fullest. If we have a conversation, we should enjoy that to the fullest. That's not the problem. But are we placing all our eggs in that basket, out of 24 hours every day, and then 8 hours of sleep? How are we spending those other 16 hours? Are we focusing on Dharma, or are we focusing on just as Lama Zopa would say, the pleasures of this one life? And this is, this can be really tough Dharma, because it challenges everything about how we live our lives. But until we start to orient ourselves towards, at least the next life, or what's going to happen when we die, what will we carry with us into our next state of existence? And unless, until we at least start to focus on that, then we're just going to run around in this hamster wheel, and it's a perpetual hamster wheel. We've been, since beginningless time, we've been everything. We've been people and animals. We've been gods on the highest, in the form realm and the formless realms. We've had the highest possible play. We've been at the peak of samsara. We've been hell beings. We've been at the very, very bottom of samsara with the most unimaginable suffering, and we've been circling around and around and around. And we're just going to keep on doing that until we refocus our priorities. And from a Buddhist perspective, it's good to look to the next life. How can we make sure that we generate the best possible karma to have the best possible continuation? But then beyond that, really looking to, okay, but how can we get completely out of this mess? How can we get completely free from samsara? How can we completely eliminate all dissatisfaction, all suffering? And how can we completely wake up to the nature of reality? How can we become fully enlightened Buddhas? Because that's the only sustainable solution. That's the only exit. And then once we achieve that, how can we help everyone else who's just circling round and around in this ocean of suffering? So that's the shift we need to make. And of course, Dharma can be, meditation can be used for stress reduction, and it can be used to be, if you're a CEO, you can become a much better CEO if you take up meditation and cultivate a bit more focus and calm. And if you cultivate a bit more altruism and compassion, then you'll become a better leader and all of that. But it has to be more radical. It has to be more fundamental than that. Otherwise, we're just going to keep circling round and round in this unsatisfactory mess. And that's when you come to that point. That's when you need refuge. That's when you need a guide. So that's what the Buddha was. He through his own cultivation, he woke up to the nature of reality, and then he presented his findings. Just like a doctor would present the causes of an illness and present you with the steps to take to become free of that illness. That's what the Buddha did. He presented a complete path to liberation. And so that's the refuge. The Buddha can't save us. He can't purify our minds. It's not sufficient to just believe in the Buddha. That's gonna get you absolutely nowhere. But if you have trust in the Buddha and trust in what he discovered and what he presented, if you step by step deepen your realizations, and at every step it is congruent with your own experience and your own analysis and your own deepening understanding, then you start to trust the Buddha. And ultimately, as I also alluded to last session, the ultimate refuge, the ultimate Buddha is within you. That's the very nature of your own mind. That's the true and ultimate refuge. So Buddha Shakyamuni is in a way a representation of that inner potential. And there's this non-duality between the Buddha, the outer Buddha, and the inner Buddha. And we kind of need to eliminate that gap and find the true refuge within. But in order to do that, we have to rely on the outer refuge of the Buddha, and then we have to rely on the methods and the teachings that the Buddha gave, the Dharma, which is obviously the second refuge. And the Buddha said that once I'm gone, what's going to be left is the Dharma. So the Dharma is actually the refuge. The teachings are the refuge that will remain in the world once the Buddha is gone. But then again, a deeper understanding of Dharma is that it's simply the nature of reality. So if we look deeply into anything, we will find Dharma. It can be the singing of the birds in the sky. If we go deeply into that and understand the mode of existence of the birds in the sky and the singing and the everything that surrounds us, if we penetrate deeply into that, then we will find the nature of reality, and we will find Dharma. And once we do that, we will find the way out of suffering. And then, of course, the third refuge is the Sangha, which is on a relative level, that's all those who carry on keeping the Buddha's teachings alive, because once those teachings are gone, then we don't have access to the methods and the path that will lead us to awakening. So those and traditionally, of course, this would be the Sangha in terms of monks and nuns who diligently practice, who spend all their time to keeping the Dharma alive in the world. That's the refuge. But it's also, you can also understand Sangha in terms of just virtuous friends, people who have maybe walked the path and come a bit further along, that can then be a guide and a support to us. But then also, of course, the Arya Sangha, the Bodhisattvas that are that in a sense are available all around us and everywhere. If we can just tap into that, that's also the Sangha jewel. So the point here is that until we reorient our lives based on this understanding of what samsara actually is, and based on an understanding of the nature of consciousness, how it doesn't just terminate at death, we will be propelled into the next existence and the next existence. And until we really, really find this strong urge to extract, what's the word I'm looking for? Extract ourselves from this cesspool of suffering that is samsara, until we find that renunciation, and that I think a more direct translation from Tibetan of renunciation is definite emergence, like this just yearning to extricate ourselves from samsara and just completely emerge from this ocean of suffering. Until we find that, then we really don't need a refuge. But once we do, then the refuge becomes the safe direction in which to turn. It becomes what we can trust in our striving to wake up. And so once we've taken that step, that shift, in that fundamental shift in priority in our lives, that's when we need a refuge. And then that's when we can start to explore deeper and deeper and deeper the nature of that refuge. So I thought we would do a little meditation kind of on these themes that I've been discussing. So before we do the meditation, maybe I should check again if there are any questions or burning concerns or comments or anything. So
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
In Buddhism, is there a conception of a first moment, like a before karma, and then it started at that point? For instance, in the Western scientific view, there's the Big Bang theory, or in some religions, they believe different things about the origin of everything. You know,
Hmm.
what made it come into being? Or does it just believe it's endless? There was never an initial point. It never started at some point. It was just endless.
Yeah, so it's like His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said, you know, the Big Bang, no problem, just not the first one. Meaning that, you know, from a Buddhist perspective, the idea of a first cause doesn't make sense. Everything arises from prior causes and conditions, which in turns arise from prior causes and conditions, and then you trace that back, and you cannot find a beginning. It is from the Buddhist perspective, it is literally endless. So consciousness from the Buddhist perspective is beginningless, and as are, you know, the afflictions. It isn't like we were, you know, we were affliction free, and then suddenly out of nowhere, you know, anger, delusion, aversion, and all the rest, ignorance, just popped out of nothing. They all have, you know, this moment, you know, if I'm angry, that moment of anger has prior causes and conditions, and you trace that back, and it's also beginningless. So which is, you know, it's not beginningless, is not something that we can wrap our minds around. But also, I mean, in the other, you know, in the other religious traditions, there is the idea of a first moment where everything came into existence, because God created it. But then you end up with the problem of, well, God, then where where did he come from? And so, yeah, so you know, if you believe in a first cause, then it's impossible to wrap your mind around that. You know, even Big Bang, if you have the materialistic view of everything starting with the Big Bang, that doesn't make sense. Like, okay, so what caused the Big Bang? Is it an uncaused phenomena that just there was nothing and then suddenly there was something? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So I guess one really has to just, you know, decide, will I believe in, or just rather, does it make more sense to me with everything arises from causes and conditions beginninglessly, or does it make more sense to me that, you know, poof, everything just suddenly at some point came into existence? But the Buddhist view would definitely be the endless one, or the beginningless option.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But then, you know, if you go deeper into the Buddhist understanding, then you realize that time itself is empty, meaning that it's merely conceptual. There is no inherently existing time. It is something that comes into existence by the power of conceptual designation. So in a sense, it is created by conceptual mind, and reality is beyond that. Like the actual reality, the actual nature of things is beyond what we can capture in concepts such as beginningless or first cause, or so time itself doesn't have ultimate existence. And sometimes in Buddhism they talk about, you know, primordial mind, or primordial Buddha mind, Dharmakaya, existing in what they call the fourth time. So it's kind of beyond past, present, and future. But I guess you need to do a lot more meditating than I have to make sense of what the blah 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 that I just produced. I can kind of say those words, but I can't claim to understand what it means, from just having the experience of completely non-dual and completely non-dual view of or non-conceptual direct perception of the nature of reality, where this whole problem of time falls away because it's poof. So yeah.
How do you define primordial mind? What does that mean?
It means so it's and different Buddhist traditions have different takes on this as well, but it basically means that there is this level to our being, at the most fundamental level. Who we are is this primordially pure, empty and luminous Buddha mind, or primordial mind, or Dharmakaya. So it's primordial in the sense that it never came into existence. It will never cease to exist, but it's also completely untouched and pure in the sense that none of the the afflictions and the ignorance and the karma and the pollution that we experience in our mind, none of that can touch this primordial level of purity. It is like the fundamental, most basic level of who we are, which was it's primordial because it never came into existence. It's never been defiled. It's always pure and unceasing, unborn. And once we realize that this is this is who we truly are, that's enlightenment, that's awakening. But again, I don't know if that make any sense. But what I just tried to convey, that's the ultimate refuge. If we can completely trust in and completely realize this level of who we are, that's the true and ultimate refuge.
I have another question about karma.
Mm-hmm.
So, can karma work on a more special level? For example, like when species go extinct or when they evolve? Like, if karma just needed these vessels for us to experience, then why isn't my cat today the same cat that was like, why weren't there cats like a million years ago just like her? Or why have humans, evolved? And is that, or can it even happen maybe at the planetary level where we're looking at, like our planet is, we've got global warming, we've got a mass extinction. Does karma explain any of that happens to us kind of like on this cumulative, like holistic level? Or is that a separate system of laws that evolution is just happening on its own with nothing to do with karma, and we're just somehow kind of tumbling into it as we go? So
the way I understand this is that there's definitely collective karma or group karma, meaning that the just the just the five of us sitting here together, in the sense that we are sitting here together, but that's because we have a shared collective karma to have this experience together, and that karma, we have generated that karma together in the past. So meaning that we met before in different constellations and generated this common shared karma. And so everyone who experiences the planet Earth has shared karma. And then obviously that experience will be very different if you're a bat or if you're a human being, but we still have this shared collective karma that is the experience of living on the earth. And then obviously, of course, all the problems of climate change, all the turmoil in the world, the wars that we are experiencing, but also all the amazing, wonderful things like, we can view a magnificent sunset, and we can rejoice in the laughter of children, or we can see all the kindness that is going on in the world as well. All of this is our shared collective karma. So I mean, so yes, you can view it as, you can view evolution and so on as just a natural process that progresses over time. That's a valid view, even also from a perspective, or from a Buddhist perspective, that's a valid view, but it's not the whole story. The deeper truth is karma, and the deeper reason that we experience what seems to be a shared reality, what seems to be an objective reality out there. The very reason that we have that experience together is that we have shared karma, and then the workings of the workings of karma are so intricate and so complex that it's said that the only one who can fully understand karma is a fully enlightened Buddha. It can only be perceived directly by a Buddha. We can't really fathom it with logical inference or conceptual analysis. Not fully. We can get the basics of it, but we can't fully see the complete workings of karma until we're fully enlightened. But yes, so to actually answer your question, everything we collectively experience is due to shared and collective karma. So maybe like we're like individual waves on the ocean. So we have like our individual karma that is shaping every individual wave, but we also have this collective karma that is like the entirety of the ocean, in a sense.
Okay, thank
Hopefully
you.
that makes some sense.
That does. It was really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was planning to do meditation, but there's just 10 minutes left, so maybe we'll leave that for next time, because it will require a bit more than it's 9 minutes now. So yeah, maybe let's see if there are any other questions. Maybe we can spend the the remaining time on that. So you so let me ask this: Are you how about this idea of reorienting oneself towards Dharma and away from, I guess, what you could call worldly pursuits? How does that idea sit with you? Like, what is, I guess, another way of formulating that question is like, what is your refuge? Do you take refuge in the worldly, mundane activities, or do you take refuge in Dharma and the cultivation of wisdom, compassion, and inner qualities?
For me, it's mostly my alone time, my where I'm able to contemplate and think. That's, I think, where I'm the most comfortable. Yeah, I think that's where I'm at.
And one thing that's really, because it can sound, sometimes, especially when you talk about renunciation, like, giving up all the nice things, but it's also important to see that another way of looking at renunciation is actually self-compassion. So the Buddhist definition of compassion is to wish someone to not suffer. So if if there's a person there and they're suffering, and you're aware of that suffering and you wish them to not suffer, that is what compassion is. So the cultivation of compassion would be to really wish, not just wish for the suffering to be alleviated, but also act for it to become alleviated and to help people suffer less. But so if we direct that wish to ourselves, if we truly have the wish for ourselves to be free of suffering, that's what self-compassion is. And a lot of us in the West, we kind of lack that self-compassion. A lot of us are racked by self-hatred and shame and not being good enough, and we have this like inner voice that torments us, and it's constantly telling us that we should get our act together, and why did you do this, and you're such an idiot, and blah blah blah. And we're really, really harsh in the way we relate to ourselves. So there is this huge need to cultivate a more kind and caring relationship to ourselves, and really cultivate this deep and genuine sense of self-compassion. But the interesting thing is that if compassion is the wish to be free of suffering, that's also exactly what renunciation is. Renunciation is just identifying the sources of our suffering as being ignorance, clinging, attachment, aversion, and all the derivatives, and then wishing to be free of them, wishing to be free of the clinging, wishing to be free of the attachment to all the things that will not ultimately satisfy. So if we can view renunciation as actually self-compassion, as actually looking out for our own best interest, then maybe the word or the term doesn't become so, it loses its frightening connotations of, you know, asceticism and just giving up all the good stuff. So meaning that, you know, you can, in a sense, you can keep the chocolate cake and you can enjoy the chocolate cake. What you do have to renounce is any type of idea that the chocolate cake will ultimately satisfy, or you know, releasing all attachment to the chocolate cake so it doesn't cause you frustration and heartache when, you know, the chocolate cake is taken away, or if there's no chocolate cake available. So renunciation doesn't mean getting rid of the chocolate cake necessarily. It means getting rid of the attachment and the unrealistic expectations on the chocolate cake. So renunciation means, you know, if we talked before about hedonia and eudaimonia, renunciation means to put your eggs in the basket of eudaimonia and trust in the cultivation of inner qualities to bring joy and happiness and contentment, and stop having unrealistic expectations on other people or events out there or things or reputation or, you know, influence or stuff. Just completely releasing any expectations that will ultimately satisfy. So that's what renunciation really means, and that's then also what true self-compassion and true self-care also means. Yeah, and given the topic of this class to be refuge, I should probably tie that back to refuge now, but we're out of time, so I will leave that exercise to you for next time. Okay, so let's end by just first of all recognizing that, you know, having these kind of discussions and spending time together exploring topics like these is a very virtuous activity. It has enormously positive effects on our minds, and it creates this positive energy that will ripple out in the world. So we can just recognize that we've generated all this positive karma, all this virtue, all this merit together, and then we can just mentally dedicate that to others. So we don't cling on to this virtue or this positive energy for ourselves, you know, thinking that this will bring good results and for me in the future, but instead we just dedicate it to others, and we can really pray that the positive energy that we generated will benefit many, many others. May it, ripple out into the world and have a positive impact on the lives of as many beings as possible. And who knows, you never know. You plant a seed and you never know what will come from that seed. One seed can produce billions of amazing fruits. So who knows what the seeds we plant here together, what kind of fruits it will bear. But we did our best, and hopefully we'll have a positive impact. So let's dedicate whatever we created to the benefit of others. And may we wake up quickly so that we ourselves can be of the most, maybe I should turn that off, the most benefit to other beings in all sorts of existence. And yeah, with that, I just say thank you for spending this time together, and I hope some of that was useful, and hopefully I'll see you next time.